Herbs can help your digestion. Herbalist Marcia Dixon tells you how. Welcome to Richters Seminars. This video presentation is from a series of free educational seminars on herb and garden topics offered each year at Richters.
So, I'm a medical herbalist. I did my training in the UK. I did my bachelor's degree in herbal medicine, and then a few years ago I went back to school and I did my master's degree in herbal medicine. So I've been pretty blessed to have had both of my university stints be specializing in herbal medicine. And I still find that in spite of that, I constantly am learning new things and experiencing new things about herbal medicine. I think it's an ongoing adventure. I operate a clinic in downtown Toronto, and I'm also working at Pacific Rim College in Victoria right now, which is a little bit busy. It's a bit of a long commute. But I seem to be surviving so far. Today, the topic is digestion, and I see there's a good turnout, and there usually is for digestive things, I think. Are you here today because you have digestive concerns of your own? Yes? Or maybe someone you love? Almost everyone I see in clinic has moderate, at best, digestive function. And digestive function is really important because the digestive system is the place where every piece of nourishment we take gets broken down into its smallest component and prepared for use by the body. So that then becomes the building blocks, building materials as it were, for every bodily function. So if we run out of building materials, that's not a very good place to start. So a lot of people, even if they don't have poor digestive function or they're not aware that they have digestive problems, they have other problems that they're more aware of, may indeed be rooted in their digestive system. So as you can imagine, digestion is both simple and complicated simultaneously. It's a bit of a paradox. So today, there's so many things to talk about really with the digestive system, and today I wanted to focus on irritable bowel syndrome, because it's so widespread, and dysbiosis, which I'll go into more detail about. Some of you may already be familiar with that terminology. I want to touch on infection in the intestinal tract, and finish up with a little bit a discussion on Crohn's disease. I'm not sure if any of you are suffering from Crohn's disease currently or know someone that is. So, digestive problems can start from any number of things, but I mainly see them starting in our contemporary society because of poor food or taking antibiotics, and that becomes the start of a digestive problem. So you might have no problems, and then suddenly you might have an infection, you might be away traveling, you might get an upset stomach, you might need to take antibiotics, you might need to take antibiotics for another infection in another place in your body, and that becomes the beginning of long-term gastric upset. So I'm going to do a little bit of background about what the digestive system, how it operates, and I like to describe the digestive system as much like a garden. So, what's the first thing you need when you're going to make a garden before you do anything? Sorry? Good soil. That's right. So soil is what the mucous membrane is inside of our intestinal tract. Right? We have a muscular layer that is our intestines, and then we have a mucous membrane, and that's the soil. And without that soil there, nothing really happens. In fact, you get a lot of your symptoms of upset stomach or irritable bowel syndrome, like symptoms from not having that mucous membrane there. So The first herb that I wanted to talk about today is marshmallow root. Does anyone know about marshmallow? Yeah? Yeah, it's mucilaginous, exactly. So I have a very small marshmallow plant here today if anyone wants to have a look. But its relative, which many of you probably cultivate or have seen around, is called hollyhock. It's familiar to many of you. So our marshmallow, the official medicinal marshmallow, Althea officinalis, is a relative of the hollyhock family. And it looks very similar. And the root is used medicinally, and it's used because of its high starch content or high mucilaginous content. And that's a great place to start if you've got gastric upset, is that marshmallow root, which literally, if you prepare it, it becomes very glutinous, thick, gooey, stringy, however you want to describe it. But it's like mucilage. If you remember using mucilage glues when you're in school, it's just like that. So if you take that herb and you ingest it, it's like lying down a nice layer of really healthy topsoil to start with. So what happens in a lot of gastric upset is that, like I was saying about how when you take antibiotics or you might have an infection, that mucous membrane or that mucus layer disappears. It can become eroded. And that compounds then it can become a vicious cycle of where that mucous membrane's not there to protect the underlying musculature and a much more sensitive layer. And so you get symptoms of irritation. You might pass mucus in your stool. You might have cramping. You might have diarrhea. So that mucous membrane, to replace that mucous membrane, is one of the first things I try to do with people after eliminating the offending agents. So there's a statistic actually about irritable bowel syndrome, and it suggests that irritable bowel syndrome is caused about 30% of the time from diet or allergies. And I tend to disagree. Even if you don't have overt symptoms of allergy, or just because something hasn't shown up on an allergy test, does not necessarily mean that you're not having an allergy or an irritation caused by something that you might be ingesting on a regular basis. Is everyone here familiar with irritable bowel syndrome, first-hand experience, or aware of what the symptoms might be? Yeah. So you get alternating diarrhea, constipation, pain, and general feeling of unwellness. So in addition to the allergies that might be causing the irritation in your stomach, it might also be caused, and they often postulate that it's caused by nervous system problems. Nervous system problems being stress and anxiety. Everyone knows what that feels like, right? And part of the reason that is because the nervous system is quite tightly tied to the digestive system. I think all of you can probably remember back to a time when you felt really nervous or distressed and you felt sick to your stomach, right? You feel it right in your gut. Or people often talk about having a gut instinct. So a lot of things happen in our, what's happening in our emotional life also is reflected in our stomach. So it's really important to consider that as a contributing factor. So with irritable bowel syndrome, you also get spasm. You get an increase in frequency in needing to use the toilet, and that's because of this spasm in the intestinal tract. So oftentimes when I'm working with someone that has digestive upset, I look to that. I look to that department. What are the stressors? Is there anxiety? Is there stress? And oftentimes there is. And a herb that I really like to use when that's the case is valerian. I have a little plant here. Has anyone grown valerian before? Do you dig it up? You grow it for the scent. It's beautiful, isn't it? Anyone else use it medicinally? And what do you usually use your valerian root for? Okay. And the bugs came, yeah. Everybody wants a little bit of it. So what you can do is you can use that root. I think valerian got a lot of its reputation for use for a sleeping aid. And it can work quite well as a sleeping aid, but it can also make you more sleepless. So it can have the opposite effect that you might want it to with regards to sleep. But valerian's also, it's bitter. It's a bit bitter, and it's relaxing to the whole nervous system. So if you're stressed out and your symptoms of your digestive upset is due to stress or anxiety and you're having spasm, even if you're not having stress or anxiety, you're having spasm, the valerian root works to relax the digestive system. It also brings heat to the digestive system. It's quite a warming herb. I was thinking today before I came about a story that I could share that might be appropriate. I like to share with you people that I've worked with in order to maybe to help illustrate some of the more factual information that might be a little bit hard to get your mind around. So I want to share with you a story of a woman named Marion. Marion is not her real name. I've changed her name to protect her privacy. And she came to see me about 4 years ago. And her initial symptoms before she'd even come to see me was that she'd had some significant digestive upset. She had what is termed dysbiosis, meaning she was having a lot of gas, she was having a lot of undigested food particle in her stool. She was generally feeling unwell. And like most of us, she sought some advice outside herself to help her figure that out. And this person that she sought advice from recommended that she stop eating dairy and stop eating wheat. Those are fairly common recommendations to make. And in addition to that, they also recommended that she stop eating protein, that she go vegetarian, and that she start incorporating more soy into her diet. So, like any desperate person would, she adhered to these recommendations because she really wanted to help herself. So 2 years after this point is when I saw her. And when she came in, she said that her main problem was that she had been losing her hair. Her hair had started to fall out. And that's when we talked back and back and back as we do. When you come in for a consultation, you have to get all of the back information and find out where it all began. And she told me the story of her gastric upset and the recommendations that she'd been given and the recommendations that she had so carefully adhered to. So here she was losing her hair. So it was pretty easy for me to tell that she wasn't getting the nutrition that she needed. Something happened. It was happening. Whatever she was doing was making her symptoms worse. And whoever she was working with at the time, whoever had given her that advice, hadn't realized that the advice that they'd given her was really actually doing her more harm than good. So in this case, the soy really just compounded the inflammation in her digestive tract. Soy is actually quite a common allergen, which a lot of people aren't aware that it's a common allergen. So they replace wheat and dairy with soy, which is another common allergen. And so her problems continued. The inflammation in her digestive tract continued. And as the time went on, she started to lose her hair. So we've got 3 years worth of digestive upset ending in hair loss. So what I did with her was, again, looking at laying down the soil again, laying down that mucous membrane again, helping to restore that layer. And that layer not only covers the muscular layer in the stomach, but it hosts all the wonderful organisms that live in our gut that actually help the food to break down. Are you all familiar with lactobacillus, acidophilus? All those wonderful things that mainstream marketing is putting into everything now, trying to get everybody to take more probiotics. So these organisms, which there are many, not just 2 or 3, which they sell in most products, dairy products now, but those organisms require that mucous membrane, that nice environment, in order to take hold and to thrive. So that was step 1. We added in that mucous membrane and then created an environment, because you can take probiotics till the cows come home. And if you don't have that mucous membrane in there, that soil, you can plant plants forever, and if you haven't got anything for your plants to root in, then they're not going to take. So that's where we began with her, with the marshmallow root. And for her, I also used the valerian because her digestive system was quite cold. She wasn't really digesting well. She was having undigested food particulate in her stool, which tells me that her food's not being digested properly. So on the line of warming up and creating that mucous membrane and that good environment for bacteria to grow, I also like to use elecampane. Have any of you used elecampane or heard about elecampane? A few of you? Yeah. Do you use it medicinally, or are you just growing it? It was recommended to you? Wonderful. Uh-huh. Oh, good. That's wonderful. So there's good advice out there that you're getting. And are you growing it yourself now to use? Oh, you don't harvest it, yeah. It's very, what's that? Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite labor intensive to harvest roots. So elecampane it has 3 different things going for it. Probably more than that, but for the digestive system, I like to think of it in terms of 3 things. So it's really warming, and it's mucilaginous. It's got mucilage in it, and that mucilage component is largely comprised of inulins. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of inulins before, but inulins get put into a lot of digestive or dietary supplements now because they realize that inulins are the sugar or the food that the good bacteria likes to eat. So again, talking about laying down that layer of soil with the marshmallow root and adding in a bit of fertilizer that might be, or the compost, that might be the elecampane. So you're creating the environment for good things to grow. And again, it's very warming. So for Marion, that's where we needed to start. We started with removing the things that were irritating her digestive system and putting in a few things that were going to help restore her gastric flora and her digestive system. Are there any questions so far? With the marshmallow root, you can chop it up into small pieces. I think there's actually marshmallow root here you can purchase. And if you just cook it, you boil it. Some people say cold decoction, which means leaving it in water overnight to sit. You can also do that. But if you boil it, you'll get the same sort of the carbohydrate out of it. And then you can just drink it as a tea.
What's the difference between using it fresh and buying something dried or whatever? Do you always use it fresh?
No, not necessarily. It's a convenience thing. I mean, if it's not summertime, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a fresh marshmallow root. But it's equally as effective, whether it's dried or fresh.
So you then just put it in warm water until it comes up, and then you cook it?
Till it comes up?
Well, dried things.
Oh, right. Yes. Reconstitutes. Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can simmer it. Simmer it for 10 to 15 minutes. You can also use powdered marshmallows, quite nice, in yogurt. So for those of you that don't really like making tea or boiling things or the labor that involves, you can easily take a teaspoonful of marshmallow powder right in your yogurt. And again, depending on who you are, you may or may not enjoy that, but it's mild and sweet. Yes?
When would you take the powder? Like, you start your day so it's the whole day, or?
Yes. Yeah, I always, for the things that coat the stomach, I recommend taking that between meals. Because you want that to go in and not mix with any of the food you might be eating. You want it to go in by itself. So just a bit of marshmallow root and yogurt on an empty stomach. You can do it first thing in the morning or last thing in the evening. So we've talked a little bit about laying down the soil. Another really important part of digestion is having adequate stomach acid. Without adequate stomach acid, you can't break down the food particulate. You can't, all that enzymes reaction that happens when you eat food and it sits in your stomach and it turns around. And the enzymes are secreted by the liver and the pancreas, all to create your digestive juices. If you don't have enough digestive juices or enzymes, your food's not going to get broken down. So for a lot of people, even as we age, our stomach acidity naturally drops off. And even people that experience symptoms of high acid, like acid reflux disease and so on, actually have low acid in their stomach, not high acid. It's kind of a paradox. But for your own particular case, you need to speak to somebody in particular about your case, because we're all different in our symptoms. Even though your symptom might be the same as your best friend or your sister or your mother, the cause may be different. So the bitter herbs that I like to use, and again, these are multi-purpose herbs. So when you search on the internet and you might find under bitter herbs, you might find one or two herbs and you might think those herbs are for me. You might be missing out on herbs that have multiple actions. So for the bitterness, for digestive system upset, I like to use chamomile. Chamomile is both relaxing, just a nervous system tonic, and it's a bitter. So when you take chamomile, it stimulates your digestion, it calms your nervous system, so it helps you get into a place where you're relaxing and digesting, not stressed out, running from the lion or your boss. So chamomile is a great herb, and it's very mild, and it too is warming. Chamomile smells really beautiful, and you can know a lot about the smell by smelling a plant, that it has a lot of aromatic properties in it. And frequently, plants that have aromatic properties are also good for the digestive system. So chamomile is also an anti-inflammatory because of all those aromatic properties are anti-inflammatory. Yes?
Sorry. Is the chamomile helping to create the adequate stomach acid?
It does. Yeah, it helps to boost up your stomach acid. Yeah. So some of the other more bitter herbs are centaury. Have you heard of centaury? Centaury is a very, very bitter herb. And that really, it's sometimes put into aperitifs. A lot of cultures drink something bitter before they eat. And something to consider if you have digestive problems, to eat something that's a little bit bitter before you eat. Like a bitter salad, like some radicchio or some dandelion leaf or some chicory. So just to retouch on the valerian, valerian is also bitter. So valerian is bitter, and it also has a nervous restorative. It has a nervous component, so it's really good for people whose digestive symptoms are associated directly with the stress that they might be experiencing, whether it's acknowledged or not. It's an excellent herb for relaxing the digestive system. So, does anyone you know have Crohn's disease? You know a few people that have Crohn's disease? Are you all aware of what Crohn's disease is? No, not really. Crohn's disease is an autoimmune disease that when your body begins to attack itself. And what happens is that you get areas in your intestinal tract that get attacked by your body, and so you get a lot of inflammation and you get really significant digestive upset. Alternating diarrhea and constipation, bloating, pain, sometimes mucus, sometimes blood in the stool. And I'm bringing this up mostly because I've had quite a number of clients that have Crohn's disease that have come in, and their first symptoms were those of irritable bowel syndrome. So they went to their doctor many times to say, I have this gastric upset, I'm having these problems. They had tests done even, but they kept on coming back as normal. So I think it's really important that if you are experiencing any digestive upset, not only to take charge and to address it on a holistic level, like perhaps see somebody that can help you with your concern, but to continue to go back to your doctor and ask for tests and make sure that things are not headed down that road. I had a patient about 7 years ago who started off just like that, and unfortunately she ended up in the hospital. So she went from having 2 or 3 years of what the doctors had considered to be irritable bowel syndrome, and at the apex of her symptoms, she ended up losing 35 pounds and ended up in the hospital for 3 months. So she went from having no recognizable disease by the medical profession, even though she'd had numerous tests, to all of a sudden being hospitalized. So fortunately, even in the most severe circumstances, there's a lot that herbs can do. So even from minor things like acid indigestion to the more serious Crohn's disease, herbs can really help to restore that balance in the body. Not only for, again, just to go back to laying down, making sure that you've got a good topsoil layer in your gut that's going to help to work to digest the food, but with Crohn's disease and a lot of other digestive upsets have this autoimmune or this immune system underlying the problem, which means that those are the herbs that become the most important herbs to take. So you might take something like Echinacea. Echinacea is quite a well-known herb for immune system function. And herbs like that, even though they're most commonly used for the cold and the flu season, that you might choose something like that, or consider using something like that if you've got this underlying immune system problem related to your digestive upset. And it would be really nice if there were something so simple as to say, well, you know, these are the 3 things that you need for all your digestive health. It's not ever that simple. I mean, humans are like snowflakes. We are all unique. And therefore our conditions are unique. The things that cause our conditions are unique. So a lot of things, just to get back to the Crohn's and digestive upset, a lot of times you might hear recommendations like, you should eat raw food, eat only raw food, and that'll fix all of your digestive problems. And really, it's actually the opposite of that. If you are suffering from digestive problems, you should eat gently cooked food. You shouldn't be trying to overwhelm your system with raw foods. They're very nutritious, they're very good for you, but they also have all their cellulose intact, and they're quite hard on the digestive system. So if you have digestive upset, one simple thing that you can do, incorporate into your diet, is just gently cooked foods, to avoid things like eating raw salads or raw vegetables. Steamed vegetables are okay. And in particular, again, you know, with the advice for any sort of digestive upset, and this may be advice that you might receive from your physician. And it's important to always question any piece of information that you get, no matter whom that person that you're getting your information from. But one thing to be mindful of is to just have a low fiber diet. If you have serious digestive upsets, you should not be adding in fiber. If you don't have digestive upsets, fiber is wonderful for you. If you have digestive upset, you should try to keep away from the fiber, because what the fiber does, that gets into your intestinal system, and it kind of scratches away on the walls. If you don't have that mucous membrane there, that nice layer of topsoil to protect the intestinal tract, it's just going to be adding to the irritation. So that's just one example of many things that can really actually compound your problem, like eating soy, like eating wheat, like eating milk products. All of these things might be that one thing for you that turns your condition from being manageable, semi-manageable, into now things have gotten much worse. So it's really important to be mindful of what's working for you, to say, okay, well, I'm taking a few things, and this seems to be working, so I'm going to continue to do it. And if things get worse, to be aware that you shouldn't get worse before you get better. That's a lot of misconception that, you have to go through this period of worse health than you've already been experiencing before you recover. So that's not true. If you're sick and whatever you're doing is making you sicker, it's not the right path. It's not the right choices. So gently cooked food, and if you have Crohn's, to avoid high fiber. So no psyllium, no metamucil, all those things that normally, for average people, when they write those things in the magazines or when you see them on the internet and they say, a tablespoon of fiber is really good for you. It's true, they're not lying, but it's just not good for everybody under all circumstances at all times. So there's one more herb that I wanted to talk about today. It's called Gota Kola. You're excited. Oh, right. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. You ate yours already. Yeah, it's used as a salad green. It's used in culinary endeavors. So, Gota Kola, G-O-T-U-K-O-L-A, 2 separate words. Gota Kola. And it comes from Asia, this plant. And as I was saying, it's a vegetable. You can eat it in your salads. You can eat it in your stews. It's a very healing plant. It really helps to restore the skin. And the skin, we have skin on the outside of our bodies, but we also have skin on the inside of our bodies. So it's important to remember that as well. So Gota Kola is good for the skin, but we also have skin on the inside of our body. So it's just as important to heal that as if it were skin on the outside. Gota Kola has a long history of use for healing leprosy and other skin afflictions. It's high in nutrients, and it's also, this plant, unlike the other plants that we talked about today, is cooling. So if your digestive upset is related or associated to having too much heat in your digestive system, or your constitution is too hot, this herb would be a good choice. So it really helps to, it doesn't necessarily take inflammation away, but it helps to rebuild the tissue. It helps the connective tissue to reform. And since we're on the culinary topics, and you might like to incorporate some other things that are nutritious into your food, is turmeric. How many of you use turmeric in your cooking? Quite a few of you. So turmeric is warming, but even though it's warming, it's good for inflammation. Inflammation is a hot condition, and turmeric is good for inflammation. So if you have inflammation in your digestive tract, as long as there's not, although they say that it's good for ulcers, I try to avoid turmeric if there is ulceration, but it's great for if there's the dysbiosis, like the bacterial imbalance, if there's IBS-like symptoms. It's a great all-round digestive herb. It's also very nutritious, so even if you don't have digestive symptoms, go ahead and incorporate turmeric, especially in the winter, into your regular, everyday cooking. And as a note, as a sidebar, just as we're wrapping up, it's really important, I can't enforce enough to you all today, that if you have serious digestive upset or chronic or long-standing digestive upset is to seek help from whomever you can. There's a couple of resources I wanted to mention. The Ontario Herbalist Association is a great resource to find a clinician in your area. Richters Herbs is a marvelous place to purchase your medicinal plants, but most of you already know that because you're here because of the plants. And to remember, just with, going and seeking help, it's important to do that because things like gastric infections can be latent or relapsing and remitting. So you do get a really cyclical pattern that oftentimes are mistaken for IBS symptoms. They think that it's the IBS syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, when indeed, in fact, it's an enteric infection. So things like Giardia, it's really important to get your stool tested. Your GP can test your stool for you if you're concerned that you have an infection that you've picked up while you're traveling, and you don't need to travel to pick up these diseases. You can get them off any vegetable that we're eating here. So it's not something that's just reserved to developing nations or the Caribbean. You can get an upset stomach anywhere from anything you're eating. In fact, a colleague of mine just recently had a really bad upset stomach. She was going to the toilet all the time. She had terrible diarrhea and some nausea. And 3 days into it, I said to her, you need to go get tested. And she said, I think it's got to be on its way out now. And 5 days into it, and 7 days into it, 10 days into it, she finally went. She'd lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. And it was only then when she went to the doctor and had her stool tested that she discovered it was Giardia. And Giardia is a parasite. And you'd think, well, how can we, it's so uncommon. It's not uncommon, it's just uncommonly talked about here. So a lot of people can have these symptoms, and because even the doctors aren't necessarily used to testing for it, don't do the test. So while she had been, she's a colleague of mine, she's a herbalist, so she'd been doing due diligence and taking lots of herbs, but she hadn't had the test done. So she was trying to help her system to heal, but she hadn't gotten rid of the offending agent. So that's where it's really important to reach out and find somebody that can help you, somebody that can work with you, somebody that might know a little bit more than you do about a specific topic, somebody that can provide tests for you, and so on. But there's a time to treat yourself, and there's a time to get help elsewhere. So we talked about Marshmallow Root and elecampane for laying down that soil. We talked about Valerian Root and vervain for the nervous system associated with digestive upset due to nervous system overexcitation, too much stress. We talked about chamomile, how it's great for the stomach, being a bitter and calming. And the Gota Kola, which is very nutritive and supportive for the connective tissue in our intestines. So I'd like to take this opportunity to answer any questions that you might have about something that we've talked about today, or perhaps you have a question about some other nature that you'd like to ask.
You just mentioned vervain.
Mm-hmm.
That's like valerian as well?
Yes. Yeah, it's bitter and it's a nervous restorative. Mm-hmm. Yes? That's a great point, and thank you for asking that question. The prebiotic is the soil. The prebiotic is the laying down of the soil. The prebiotic creates the environment in which the probiotics can live and thrive. So that prebiotic, if you look on the ingredients, you'll often find inulin as one of the ingredients in the prebiotic. And that inulin can be found in elecampane. So that's one of the plants you can use as a prebiotic. And another plant that you can use that has those inulins in it is burdock root. So burdock root and elecampane, and they're everywhere. Yeah, there's no shortage of burdock. You just have to be careful with your back when you're digging them up. So, Yeah, you might want to have somebody who's really strong dig up your burdock root. But those are both part of the prebiotic medicine that you take before you take your probiotics. Mm-hmm. Yes?
If you've been given a medication to quote unquote clean you out for something like a colonoscopy, how, I presume that takes away the mucus membranes that you were talking about drastically. So how does one quickly restore, or is that possible, this mucus membrane that's taken away from it?
Okay. I'm just going to repeat the question. Did everyone in the back hear what he just asked? He asked about what can be done after you have to do a barium swallow or something that cleans out your entire intestinal tract before you have a colonoscopy or any of those scanning procedures that you do if you have, well, once you get to a certain age, they want to have a look at everything all the time. So what can be done in order to, what happens when you take those medications, and is there something that you can take in order to replace that mucous membrane? So it can be done fairly quickly. And again, you look to the things that restore the mucous membranes in your gut. You take that marshmallow root and the elecampane, and you take handfuls of acidophilus. And one thing that you can really do that's a nice a dietary thing that you can do on a regular basis is eating fermented foods. I'm not sure if any of you make your own fermented foods, make your own sauerkraut. Sorry? Sauerkraut, yeah. And there's lots of literature on the internet about how to sour your own vegetables. And when you sour your vegetables, you're doing lactofermentation, which means you're using the bacteria that's already on your food, the lactobacillus, and you're farming it to ingest it. And it's in a form that's alive. So when you eat soured vegetables, if you make them yourself, they are alive. That lactobacillus is alive. You don't have to worry about it being encapsulated and possibly being dead. So you're eating, not only does lactofermentation break down the vitamins and nutrients in your food, but it also replenishes those good bacteria in your stomach. Did that answer your question? Okay. Are you going to start making sauerkraut?
Well, I have done my porridge done now.
Sorry?
Porridge done now.
Aha.
Yeah.
Very nice. Were there any other questions?
How do you get around the question of living in a very small community in which the doctors are all of the old-fashioned type, getting to someone else as you're suggesting, and then making any...
Having a communication between you and the physician?
Going to be. Let me say to you.
Right. Okay.
But
Okay.
meanwhile, you're in dreadful distress and they want to give you an operation. But you don't live near these other people.
Right. Well, you should really look at the Ontario Herbalist Association because there are herbalists everywhere. There might be somebody close to you, even though, I'm downtown Toronto, but there are lots of herbalists that live outside of town and all over Ontario. Is there, if you want to ask me about a specific area, I might be able to refer someone to you in particular.
It's near Picton, south of Picton.
Centaury County.
That's west of, I'm just trying to figure out.
It's 45 minutes, let's say, to up north to Belleville, or 45 minutes or an hour to Kingston.
Okay. Yeah, let's look on the, if you want to email. What kind of fasting? Oh, cayenne pepper, lemon, maple syrup? Yeah. Yeah, again, I think it's very individual. I try to, when I work with people, I do individualized programs for people because not eating or just drinking lemon and maple syrup is not for everybody. And in fact, a lot of people, when they're really run down and tired, they immediately think that they should have a cleanse because that's what the media tells everybody, is that if you're run down or tired, it's because you're toxic and you need to clean out. But for a lot of people, especially in our society now, we're run down because we're depleted of nutrients, because we're overworked. It's not because surely there's probably some toxic element as well, but we need to do rejuvenation. We need to add things in. We don't need to take things away. So again, it just depends on the person, and I don't recommend, going to the health food shop and buying one of those kits, because you're not everybody. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, it's unlikely. If she's stressed, and when you cleanse, you're putting more stress on your body. It's true, but that's also an old-fashioned idea from a time when you might have had more downtime. Not like I'm going to do my detox and I'm going to work for the next 10 days straight. Yeah. I know, I see it all the time. Yeah. 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 Yeah, there's so many nice things you can do for your body. And that never pops into my mind when I think of, one of the top nice things you could do for your body. Yeah. But there's lots in the middle that you can. Like, that's on an extreme. Yeah. Thank you very much.
At Richters, it's not just a garden, it's a whole new world. For herb plants, seeds, veggies, and more, visit us at richters.com or call 1-800-668-4372.